It's Friday. Finally, it's Friday. I think I must say that every week, but I feel that way every week. Yeah, today I want to talk a little bit. It's kind of part of the world building series, because I am making use of it in my new world. But I also think that it applies for world building for almost any world that you wanted to build and flesh out a bit. And today's topic is blood sports. Now, that could be a very wide range of things. That could be almost anything, as long as it is competitive and violent. That's kind of the two classifications for a blood sport. Kind of says it all in the name, doesn't it? Now, this could be fantasy sports, such as what we get from Warhammer with Blood Bowl, Murder Ball, Blood Ball, death sports, whatever you would like to call it. Or it could be something much more realistic, like the Colosseum from Rome. But whatever sport, whatever it is, it's bloody and it's competitive. That's the two things we're focusing on. And there is a reason that we're doing that. Now, first off, creating a sport, or maybe more than one sport, that is popular in your world adds depth and character to the world. It fleshes out society. It's one of the things that you can say as an answer to what do people do when they're not adventuring, or what do people do when they're not working. They participate, or they go watch, or whatever. It adds character to your world. It also says something about your world, because the way that it's viewed by society impacts on your characters. Is it a fringe element that enjoys it, but cultured society doesn't want anything to do with it because it's brash and brutal? Is it the parlance of higher society? Do your nobles like to hobnob and hang out with each other while they're watching people kill each other? It says something about the tone of your society. The other thing is that there needs to be the realization of what allowing a blood sport says about the ruling class. You see, a sport like that does a few things psychologically when you have it. First off, it desensitizes people to violence. It makes people more used to seeing blood and gore. Now, while in our modern world, you hear that a lot, desensitized to violence, action movies, all this kind of thing, and people talk about it as if it's a bad thing. In a medieval culture, especially a medieval fantasy culture, being desensitized to violence would actually have some very concrete benefits. For one, you'd be less likely to panic. If an orc attacks your village and you've never seen blood before, you're probably going to panic. But if an orc attacks your village and you're used to seeing orcs on the Blood Bowl field tear people in half, you're going to think, oh shit, he's strong, I should get out of here. But you're not going to panic. And there's a key difference there. You're going to be able to logically process that it is a dangerous situation and react knowingly rather than panicking and reacting instinctually. Being desensitized to violence in a medieval fantasy setting would be a lifesaver. On top of that, it breeds competition, and competition avoids stagnation. If people are just going about their daily lives, going to work, going home, there is a monotony there that slows people down. Give people a local sports team to cheer. Give them a sport one night a week. Give them a reason to gather with their local fellows, and it helps to build community. It sounds crazy, but look at places that have local sports teams versus places that don't, and you find a better local camaraderie. Again, in a medieval world, that could be huge. Now, let's flip it though, because that could also be a bad thing. Let's say that you're a tyrant that's taken over a place, and you see that these people have this local camaraderie, that they come together with each other to talk about these sporting events and to discuss their area. As a tyrant, you don't want that. You don't want people coming together to discuss things. You don't want them feeling part of a larger whole. You want them isolated. If that's the case, what do? You get rid of the games. You crush the thing that gives them that unity. And that's actually what's happened in my game at current. Blood Bowl, which is a non-trademark infringing game that I've created, which is similar in many ways to American football played with spiked balls by orcs and humans, but in no way infringes on any copyrighted material. Yeah. Used to be the sport of the world. It was, every town had a team. Everyone wanted to be a Blood Bowl player. It was the game. And there was something to be said about the fact that it was a very violent, bloody game, but it was revered by the nobility. You know, the kings and the knights attended. In fact, in my setting, the Blood Bowl team in the capital city was actually called the Knights. And they were actually sponsored by the knighthood. The king's son, the prince, played on the team. It was a noble thing. There were a lot of former adventurers that joined the team. There were a lot of low-ranking knights joined the team. I say low-ranking because most of the time the high-ranking knights were past playing age. They were too old. And yeah, there was a certain kind of noble respect to it. It was a kind of combat, but it had rules. And the knights looked on that very favorably. The knights, who believed that all combat should have rules, in a way saw Blood Bowl as an example of what a gentleman's war should be. And then came the Emperor. The old king died. Well, yeah, he did die. Yeah, that's accurate. The old king was killed. The Emperor came along, and he banned the games. He closed the stadiums because he did not want people having that noble combat. He did not want them having that camaraderie. He did not want them gathering. He wanted them individual and alone and scared. And so he destroyed the game. Now, on Ranmore, where the Emperor is not physically there, announcements came out saying that the game was to be banned, and the professional leagues, as it were, basically did shut down. But that hasn't stopped kind of hedge leagues, small local leagues, small local tournaments, amateur type teams. They still exist on Ranmore. On Tarmore, it's illegal. I mean, it's to the point that if you are caught with a ball, you will be arrested. Tarmore is a lot more strict in every way. That's the main thing to remember in that, is that in the setting I'm building, Tarmore is completely under the Emperor's thumb. Ranmore is ostensibly still following the same laws, but they are not enforced in the same way. They are not enforced to the same degree. That's not to say that they can't be. If they really want to get rid of someone, they can. Because the law is still the law. But it's not enforced as often. Which makes for an interesting kind of dichotomy, because we know this is illegal. We know they usually don't enforce it. But if we do this, it gives them something else they can use against us. If they do. So yeah, it will be interesting. I've actually started writing a little bit about an NPC that will come into things, who is a Blood Bowl player, or an ex-Blood Bowl player now, I suppose. I've actually developed a couple classes, or paths rather, based on Blood Bowl. So you can be a barbarian that follows the way of the Basher, that is basically a Blood Bowl barbarian. They specialize in maneuvers for Blood Bowl. That doesn't mean that they're not useful off the field as well, because as with anything, maneuvers that you learn for one aspect benefit somewhere else. The idea of being able to deliver a swift, painful blow that's going to injure your opponent on the field, that same blow will still injure an opponent off the field. So, I think there'll be an interesting twist And I've said to the group already that depending on how much they want to go down the road of Blood Bowl will depend on how big it becomes in the game. If they just kind of want to sideline it and not think about it, it doesn't have to play into things. But if they choose to, they could become Blood Bowl players and play in tournaments as they journey across the world and, basically use Blood Bowl as a medium of traveling through this adventure. It's completely up to them how much they want to make the game part of it. There are some interesting things that probably will only come out if they make it part of it. But then there's probably some things that won't come out if they're focusing on that because they won't be looking somewhere else. So it's like with anything, it's give and take. As you can probably tell if you ever pay attention to what's beside me, I'm almost to my office now, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the video there today. Hopefully I've said something beneficial to people. It's a way of adding something to your world. It's that kind of detail that tells your players that it's a real living, breathing world and not just something that you've stuck together in 10 minutes. Use sports. Use something. Use entertainment. It doesn't have to be sports. I just like sports. Like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.